Moving swiftly along, this next piece is called Perspectives on the Future of Oil and Gas Safety from a Former Insider. Most of us in here will, or at least should, recognize our next speaker. He's going to talk to us about complexity, talent retention, and perceptions of the business. Will you welcome, please, to the stage, Jakob Thomason.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Alan, and thank you for inviting me. It's great to be around, and it's a little bit of a hard act to follow this simulation of the Hudson River landing. I'm going to start with an anecdote, but the overall idea is to say, well, what is next in the safety of the oil and gas business seen from my chair a little bit outside? So, you know, I'm serving a board of an kind of not-for-profit organization, and this has nothing to do with safety, but it's a not-for-profit organization. The board, I can't tell you which, you may be able to guess, but the board is equipped with a very, very, I would say, high intellectual capacity, extraordinarily horsepower in intellect. And it's a great board to be at. A while back, since it's a not-for-profit organization, the equity is invested rather passively, like in bonds or the odd share here and there. And a while back, there was this discussion going on at the board level to change the investment strategy of the equity to something more sustainable, with a bigger focus on sustainability, in other words, getting out of, among others, oil, gas, and coal. And that was all very well. I was, of course, kicked out of the door. Back then, I was not quite considered an outsider, a former insider. So I couldn't participate since they believed that I was religious about oil and gas and wouldn't allow such a sustainability strategy. But it was adapted, and sure enough, no more investments in oil, gas, or coal-related fossil fuel industries. Now, a while later, the board decided to go to the US to learn from other similar organizations how they do their job. And of course, you know, board and senior management jumped on the plane and flew across to the US without thinking too much about the slight dilemma that some cynics would be able to see about, on one hand, being sustainable, and on the other hand, using a lot of jet fuel to go to the US. And to me, that points at the situation, of course, in Denmark, but also elsewhere, that brain thoughts and real actions do not quite follow, or in short, for you guys in the oil and gas industry, people hate you, but they love your products. And that dilemma, I think, is a real dilemma, and I think for you guys, it's a lost battle to change that. It's just a lost battle. I'll return to this anecdote or the contents of it during my talk, but it revolves a lot about the perception in the world of the industry. Now, just to give a bit more flavor to Alan's introduction of me, I do consider myself a little bit of a former insider. Those of you that know me will probably know that I have 28, 29, 30 years in the operative part of the oil business, ending up with 7 years as the CEO of Maersk Oil. And after that, when I left a couple of years ago, I have taken up some board roles, so I'm not completely out of the industry. I'm at the board of Lundin Petroleum, that some of you might know was among the companies that discovered the Johan Sverdrup field in Norway, and that's a really exciting board to be at. I'm also chairing a couple of boards where the companies are represented here today. Esvagt, the company with the nice orange-red ships that pick people out of the sea when they drop in and service the offshore wind business a lot, and rely on NewTech that does high-quality safety training, also for the oil and gas business. So I'm kind of involved on the sidelines, but not as an executive anymore. But next to that, I'm also doing my own little business. You probably saw JBT Consult, where I'm trying to help basically mainly the construction business in adapting some of the adopting and adapting some of the thoughts from the oil industry and from my experience to basically improve the game in the construction business. And for those of you that have worked with me, you probably remember that I was reasonably passionate about safety in my time as CEO, and that passion has continued, and I really love that piece of work. So what I'm going to do today is take a real helicopter perspective for you, kind of broad brush. I haven't polluted my presentation with data or facts. It's my opinions, so I don't have any slides. And you can, of course, challenge me afterwards. The point I'm trying to make is that just to keep the status quo of your safety performance, you need to figure out how to attract and retain talent. You will need competencies going forward, and you will see people running away from the business because of a lot of things. So I'm going to give a little bit of flavor to that. And I'm going to start off with the supply and demand situation, which may seem quite remote from safety, but nevertheless, I do believe that it's quite important. On the demand side, in my world, there's no doubt that the world will be using oil, and especially gas, for many years to come. Yes, there is a peak oil demand out there, but it's nowhere near, and we don't really see behaviors changing radically away from oil and gas, and we don't see any solutions that are going to be able to fly my board and senior management to the US without a bit of jet fuel. So yes, oil and gas is going to be around for many years. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't believe in man-made climate change, because I think, like most of you in here, I do, and I firmly believe we should do something very, very serious about it. But I just think that oil and gas is really a fantastic part of the transition. And if you look at the Danish power generation, where, in 2017 it was around 40% of the national power generation that was coming from coal, we still have a long way to go to transition globally as well, over to first gas and then to something less polluting. So yes, there will be a demand for many years to come. On the supply side, I mean, we all know about the US unconventional revolution that has changed the dynamics of the business completely. And I think it has brought the thoughts to most minds that, yes, there's plenty of supply out there. We are not going to be short of oil and gas in any near future. Now, that doesn't mean that it's simple oil and gas. A lot of the projects that we do, sorry, I'm probably going to say we every now and again, that you do are getting more and more complex, deep water, high pressure, high temperature, Arctic, and so on. But of course, they are challenged by short cycle projects like the US unconventionals, where the big investments are becoming more and more difficult. So we have this, in my view, to just cut this one short, this supply and demand situation where a lot of what we do is becoming more and more marginal. And certainly, if you look at the region around us here, the maturing region with many old facilities, a maturing situation where there's still a lot of work to do, still a lot of money to be made, it is becoming a more marginal business. So it's not making money like it used to. There may be short periods where the oil price climbs and everybody's happy in the oil business, but there may also be periods where it drops, and a lot of the North Sea production is basically underwater. There's still running room here and there, like Norway has quite a lot of exploration running room, but I don't think personally that we will see a lot more Johan Sverdrups drop out of the sky at any regular interval. It will be smaller and more challenging discoveries, and if we look at the Barents Sea, I personally believe that that's still unresolved, how to make that commercial in a responsible way. So all in all, the technical solutions, despite all efforts for demanning, automation, digital solutions, the technical solutions we're looking at are getting more marginal and more challenging. It's a real challenge. So that's the kind of, in my view, very high level supply and demand. Then we come to the brand of the business, or the perception, a little bit more on the anecdote from before. So there's no doubt that the climate change discussion is here to stay, and it's picking up pace every day. And of course, we saw that outside the doors this morning. So it's something that needs to be taken seriously by everybody. And of course, you guys in the oil and gas industry are right at the center. Maybe, of course, the coal industry is worse, but you are right at the center. And in the old days, we would probably say, well, you know, we realize that there is this discussion going on. We really listen to it, and we really want people to like us. And when they do erratic stuff like not investing but still using oil and gas, then of course there is a logical breach, and we can explain that. Actually, I think you have lost that opportunity. I mean, it's too late. The oil business has been poor at explaining itself for so many years, and now it's just too late. It's the point of no return. That doesn't mean that your product is not going to be used, but it means, I think, on the investor side, that you will see some investors bailing out, like my organization and others. If there's good money in oil and gas shares, you will still have lots of investors. It won't be the end of the world, but there will be some bailing out, more and more with time. And on the funding side, if you sum up the bigger risk of the long cycle projects and the kind of the reputation, the cost of capital for the business is going to get higher. That doesn't mean that there's not money to be made, but the cost of capital is going to be higher. And that, again, will potentially make a lot of the projects more marginal, and you will have to handle risk, also safety risk, in a different way, because a lot of funding investors will shy away from the risks in the oil and gas business. Still a lot of work to be done, but more challenging. Then the other aspect, in addition to the investment side, which is, now I'm coming really to my point here, is the challenge of attracting talent. I mean, the business has historically been blessed with high margins, allowing high salaries, a lot of interesting jobs for everybody, basically. Interesting jobs all over the place for geologists, geoscientists, engineers, everybody. You could come in and get the excitement of your life, and I really believe that that is still the case. But it's getting more and more marginal and more difficult to pick up good wages for it. And then at the same time, it's tough for many young people in this part of the world to explain why they want to go to the oil business. It's not easy to sit at dinner tables or parties with your friends and tell them that you are in the oil business. I mean, my kids, who have been burdened with loads of facts about the oil business and the hypocrisy that a lot of people see, and the fact that oil and gas is here to stay and for a while, and you just have to use it with care. They really don't want to work in the oil business at all. I mean, they think it's terrible. And you know, I've really loaded them with facts and figures that show the opposite, and told them that you can actually run an oil company in a responsible way, and we should all be responsible consumers. And I think the combination of lots of other places to go for work, lower salaries in many areas, smaller margins, more risk, and the reputation is going to mean that it's really tough to attract talent going forward. And to me, that is something that we haven't discussed today, but if you look at the structure of your business, everything, you can't have systems that work, you can't have a safety culture that works if you don't have the competency. You need to be able to attract the best people, and probably more than ever. Now, you may need less people with time because of automation, because of digitalization and so on, but you will still need the best talent to stay safe. And that is valid for the entire value chain, right from exploration to well design, to project maturation, to construction, to installation, and of course to operating and maintenance the facilities. If you don't have the best talent, you are going to run a big risk. So it's just not a simple place for you to be. And I really believe that to carry on with a really strong history of oil and gas safety, where we have actually managed to pair, in my world, systems with culture to come to a much better place. Not perfect, but much better. In order to continue that journey, you need to really care about talent. So my advice to everybody in the room that represents the oil and gas business, and my thoughts on it are, treat your talent really well. I'm sure there's a lot of you that really agree with me violently on that. But also you need to have a very, very strong strategy for how to attract and retain the best talent within every discipline that you use in your business for many, many years to come. So there's a lot of complexity. I think everything we've heard today shows us that there's work to do. We have come a long way. There's a long way to go for us. But to me, it's kind of incremental steps that we are taking to improve the industry, to make sure that we don't have these big disasters. And these increments will all fall apart if we don't have the talent. We cannot protect the culture. We cannot protect our systems. We may have ever so good leadership. We may have ever so good initiatives. It's not going to work. So with these words, I will stop and say thank you for listening in. And most of you have stayed awake despite the difficult time of day. And then I think it's over to Alan again for the panel session.